I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is January 18th, 2023. I'm joined as usual by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford. How are you, Nigel?
I'm good. Great to be here.
Also here, reminiscent of old times, filling in for Corey Morgan in his own unique way, Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor. Dave, how does it feel to be back on The Pipeline?
It's great. Do I have to take my glasses off like Nigel did?
You do the...
So wave it around.
Wave it around a bit.
Yeah. He's good at that. He's very good at that.
Great to be back.
That's what you look like without glasses.
Scary, huh?
Just like never seen it. Yeah. A special shout out to Mama Naylor. We'll be watching tonight.
She will be. I'm wearing my Christmas suit. So
nice.
Yeah.
It's nice. All right. We've got a good show. We're going to be talking about the just transition again, but this time narrowing in more specifically on what Rachel Notley and the Alberta NDP have to say about it, which isn't very much. A lot of words, but not a lot to say about it. As you'd expect, they're in a bit of a tight spot, caught between their more hardcore left-wing eco NDP base and more average everyday Alberta voters. Most average everyday Alberta voters, I don't think, are all that keen on shutting down the biggest source of wealth and jobs in the province. Some of her base might be actually a bit more okay with that. And Notley's a bit caught in the middle. So we're going to be talking about her reaction and her comments around the just transition. After that, we're going to talk about a woman, an Ontario woman, who was killed for not wearing a mask. You heard that right. I'll have to be careful how I say this because the courts have decided to do nothing. But we've just found out in the last few days that a woman in Ontario, we only found out because there was a publication ban for no good reason imposed by the courts. I think we can all guess what the reason is. They don't want people to know about it, but we now know about it. An Ontario woman was killed in a hospital. She was not wearing a mask. Security guards came at her, not after they turned the security cameras away. And all we could see in the cameras after that is them wheeling her dead body away. And apparently, no one's going to be held responsible for this. It's not a casual story to talk about, and it's just gobsmacking. I'm just gobsmacked that there hasn't been an outcry in the media. Anyway, we're going to dive into this, the biggest story of the last 2 years that no one has heard about. I think that is what it is. Reading more back into the funny crazy, we're going to then talk about Alberta lawyers. 30 Alberta lawyers have been suspended from practicing law in Alberta because they have refused to undergo politically correct re-education from the Law Society. Bizarre stuff. Okay, before we get into it, though, I want to thank my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I've been a member of the CSSA for well over a decade. I trust them with my annual membership dues to represent me as a firearms owner in this country because they are Canada's leading firearms rights group. Without them, the federal government would have taken away far more guns than they already have. They would have limited far more of our gun rights than they already have. But the CSSA is Canada's leading firearms organization. If you own guns or believe in the right to own guns in this country, you need to be a member of the CSSA. So go to cssa-cila.org or do as I do, just Google them and become a member. It's worth every single penny. If gun owners don't stand together, there's going to be absolutely nothing left because we know the way this is going. They're coming for every single gun. Wow. All right. Well, speaking of Ottawa coming for things, we're now starting to get a little more flesh on the bones of the so-called just transition of Justin Trudeau's federal government. We've had some briefing notes that have come to light recently, some other documents prepared for the Natural Resource Minister, Wilkinson, I think. And it's created a firestorm. Even moderate, progressive, center lefty columnists like Don Braid at the Calgary Herald have been speaking out. That this is not a Chicken Little thing. This is not cranky right-wing Albertans who hate everything about Ottawa, grind Chicken Little. This is Ottawa now actually has some projected numbers for the job losses coming to nearly 200,000 in Alberta alone for the so-called just transition away from our energy sector as we know it. And this has obviously provoked a response from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who was predictably gone to war over this. Very, very strong words. Who I think is sending clear signals she will go to war and do everything possible against it. But former Alberta Premier and current NDP leader Rachel Notley was pretty quiet about it. Very, very quiet, and would say she would have some word salad, some verbal diarrhea of, well, it's not good, need more information. Well, that was not cutting it. And so on the CBC the other day on West of Centre, she was asked about Jagmeet Singh supporting just transition, calling for it to be even more justly transitioning. And, she's trying to walk the tightrope here because Jagmeet Singh is not really trying to get elected in Alberta. She said it's not helpful. It's not helpful that the federal government threw out that number. Either they're talking about a cap and how many job losses. Quite honestly, neither is helpful. Both are wrong, and I've been clear on that. And that has been my position, and I will advocate for that position with every tool and tactic I can muster, should I be given the opportunity to do that job. Because it's not practical. As you know, when we were in government, we did roll out the principle of an emissions cap. I don't think that's a bad idea. So really all she has said is, my position is to say, well, do you support just transition? And she says, well, my position is that I will stand up for Alberta. And that's my position. She constantly says, that is my position, and I will fight for that position. But she doesn't come out hard against it. Now, that was not cutting it. So today there was a news conference in Calgary, and she's tried to add a bit more to it, but I'll see what you guys make of this. It's very clear to me that the provincial government is asleep at the wheel and has not been doing its job. She said it was jaw-dropping levels of incompetence. So what she's doing now, her position on the just transition isn't to go to war with the just transition. It's to blame the Alberta government for, I'm not really sure why, but the Alberta government is at fault here. I think threatening that evil for what she's trying to say is Ottawa wouldn't be doing this if the Alberta government was perhaps more cooperative and pliable with what it is Ottawa wants. But Ottawa's doing this because the Alberta government is not flexible enough. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that's how I'm reading into it. Dave, was there anything else around just transition from Notley and her various evolving positions around this we missed?
Well, one of the things she talked about, Derek, was that, things might want to be put on the table until next spring.
Yeah.
And of course, we know what happens next spring.
Yes.
It's the provincial election. So again, she's just trying to deflect it, move it down the road a little bit, and sort of get it out of the headlines. She even said she really didn't know enough about it to comment on it. So it's hard when your boss is Jagmeet Singh and he's advocating for basically the economic destruction of the province that you are now trying to go and become the leader for. So she's in a very tough place, no doubt about that politically.
So let's follow on that point, Nigel. She is essentially saying she wants it delayed till after the spring. She wants just transition delayed. She hasn't said it needs to stop, it needs to not happen. She's just saying, well, we need some more time and it should be delayed. And as Dave said, well, what is this spring? I mean, an election would be an awfully bad time for just transition to be a big issue. Do you think we're reading that right, or am I being too uncharitable in saying she's not against just transition? She's just saying we need more information and we should delay it until after the election.
What else is she going to say? I think Dave put it very nicely. Jagmeet Singh is her boss. This is one of the signature items that are in the deal with Prime Minister Trudeau for the supply agreement that they have that is supposed to take them through until May of 2025 to the next federal election. Singh has put her in an impossible position, so she has to do the best she can. She can't come right out and say, well, I don't think she can come out and say, we're going to fight this all the way, because the next thing is a phone call from the boss and says, well, I thought we had a deal on this, and you don't. But this document that came out that calls all this thing is actually a pretty, it's a lot more lethal than than it sort of is represented to be in the mainstream presentation of it, because it's very standard when a minister goes out to make an announcement that he can expect to get questions from the
Yeah, it's
press.
got some Q&A.
So they prepare the Q&As, and the Q&As tell you what they really think. If they say this, then you say that. And when you go through this document, they lay it out that there's more than 2 million Canadians who are going to be affected by this, right through the economy. And not all of them are in Alberta. This is a national catastrophe, if you want to say it. And when I say it tells you what they really think. One of the questions is, well, what's going to happen if there aren't enough of these great new green jobs? And the proposed answer was, well, we're going to need more janitors and truck drivers. No disrespects to janitors. We're always going to need people to clean up. Well, I hope we're always going to need people to drive trucks. But the fact of the matter is, it's just a sort of a dismissive, let them eat cake. Why? They'll only spend it on beer and popcorn anyway. If I can take you back to a previous Liberal piece of condescension, these people really don't care about ordinary Canadian workers. And I say ordinary because they themselves are not ordinary. These are people who, they shower before work, not after work. It's they don't get their hands dirty. They sit there with the laptop and they make decisions about what other people should do with their lives. Horrible situation. So as for Notley, she can't support that.
So let's talk about the politics with Notley and the NDP on this in a bit more depth. The NDP, like the UCP and most political parties, is a coalition of interest, and it's got a spectrum of people. On one side, you've got a bunch of freaking vegan green loonies who want to, would be quite content to shut down the economy. They think that they don't care. It's worth saving the planet in their minds. This is an apocalypse happening before our eyes, and we have to do this or the world ends. And so they're quite adamant they want to see this. And on the other side, you've got, I know guys who actually work in the oil patch, unionized at Fort McMurray, and have voted NDP once or twice. And, they're pretty regular, normal people. And, these are truck driving, gun shooting guys. Those are very different people to be voting for the same political party. They're on different planets. And for Notley to have any chance of winning, she needs both of them. How we'll go to you first, Dave. How successfully do you think she's going to be in threading the needle on this and in balancing these very disparate sides? Is she going to? Do you think this kind of statement, just saying, well, it's the incompetence of the provincial government is the reason that this is happening. If I'm there, maybe we won't have just transition because Justin Trudeau can deal with me and I can make a deal. Do you think that's going to cut it in terms of trying to keep these two completely different sides with her?
Yeah, if she wants to get elected, she's going to have to cut loose the green lunatics and propose something that at least, stands up somewhat for Alberta. And don't forget, after Jagmeet Singh, another one of her influencers is unions. Alberta Federation of Labor has a seat on their board. And some in the union, there are some unions that are quite adamant about.
Union members are different, but like the Alberta Federation of Labor, Gil McGowan, he's a Marxist and an eco-radical, and he has supported radical anti-oil sands actions in the past, even though there's a bunch of unionized people in the oil sands. So there's a disconnect between the union bosses and
the union members, right? So exactly. So she may have to discard or not listen to Gil as much as Gil would like to be listened to. She's got to come out almost to the center of the political spectrum, I think, Nigel, if she wants to get elected again.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Really, the only option that she has is to point to Danielle Smith and say, there's the, burn the witch, and let's not talk about the awkward little realities over here, because if the truth is known and the truth is remembered, more to the point, when she spent a few years dealing with Justin Trudeau before, trying to protect Alberta's oil patch, it didn't go so well. We lost pipelines. We lost influence. We accepted an emissions cap.
Carbon tax.
Carbon taxes, never on the ballot, but it was done all to try and secure the social acceptance. And when we had the social acceptance, we didn't get the pipeline anyway. So she doesn't have much to stand on.
And
So-
it's not an issue that's going to go away either,
No.
because for the UCP to win, picking a fight with Trudeau is red meat for UCP voters. So you can bet your horses that the UCP is going to try and keep this front of mind for the next several months.
So, Dave, you were saying that she needs to kind of jettison that far left, hardline, eco-radical side. Part of me thinks that actually might work in a way. She doesn't need to jettison them, but she, I was at a conference at Edmonton about 2 months ago, and I was talking about, the difficulty in the coalitions of these parties. And I think the NDP, at least in Alberta's coalition, is probably fairly easy to keep together because the hard left in Alberta has low expectations. They had never been in power until, one term they had with Notley. Some of the left backed Alison Redford as a temporary alliance of convenience against the Wild Rose in 2012, but the left had never been in power in its own right until 2015. They had 4 years only. So they don't have very high expectations. They'll take half a loaf. And so she, I don't think she actually has to give them that much. I don't think it's, she's not the NDP leader in BC where you have this huge eco-radical movement that is a decisive part of her party and has high expectations of results. So if she took a moderate route, Nigel, do you think the left of her party would stay with her?
Yeah, look, the people that we're talking about are in the same situation vis-a-vis the NDP as social conservatives, pro-life people are with any of the conservative parties that we've seen. Sure, you may not like what the party is doing, but are you going to do better with somebody else? And the answer, of course, for the social conservatives is, well, no, at least these people also talk about low taxes. And with the Greens, they're not going to get a better deal out of the United Conservative Party, so they'll probably hold their noses. And the worst that can happen, maybe they won't show up in such numbers.
So if she's got to take a moderate tack on this, is this moderate enough? Because I just don't think she's actually saying anything. She's had essentially 3 phases of her messaging. The first one was, I don't know, really just had nothing to say. Tried to stay quiet. Then there was on the CBC where she just says, it's not helpful and it should be delayed until after the election. Well, then we could do, our transition. And now today, her tack is, well, it's only really happening because of Danielle Smith and the UCP. She says, when we have a premier, so she asked about just transition, she told the press, we have a premier who is leading a government who has been in complete and utter chaos for months, if not years, and has really failed to demonstrate any level of competence. I'm actually not disagreeing with any of that. I just don't think it's a relevant answer to just transition.
Well, it's not relevant because, Danielle has been around since October, and this bill has been in preparation in various ways since 2019. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't pin that on Danielle Smith.
All she's got is burn the witch,
Yep.
Burn the witch. And I don't think that's a response Albertans want to hear.
No.
They want to hear what your platform is.
Okay. Well, we're gonna change it up now to a story that we still only know a little bit about. An Ontario woman. She was in an Ontario hospital, I think 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And she was in there, and I think she went down for lunch or something, and she was found sitting somewhere with her mask around her neck, which does about as much good as around your face. I'm sorry, YouTube. I did not mean any of that. I was joking. Masks save your lives. And some security guards came to her, told her to put her mask on. Some kind of argument and struggle ensued. One of the security guards goes over, and we've all seen the footage, and they just turn the camera away. The camera's turned away, and some time elapses, and the next thing you see is them just wheeling her dead body away. So she was asphyxiated or had some kind of death. We don't really know too many details, but what we do know is she wasn't wearing a mask. Security guards came with her and subdued her because she was not wearing a mask, and she died as a result. Not a ton known in between there. Courts ruled that there's not going to be a prosecution. There's no prosecution at all now. Most shocking to me was that there was a publication ban. The courts put in place a publication ban. Now, publication ban is normally in places where you have sexual assault and you're protecting the identity of a victim, or you have a high-profile case, and to ensure that you get a fair trial from a jury, you have to maybe keep some things under wraps temporarily. This had a publication ban for 2 years. Now, we can only speculate about why there was a publication ban, but who of you wants to take a guess about why the courts put in place a publication ban on a woman being killed because she wasn't wearing a mask?
If I say pick me, do I have to apologize to Facebook first?
No, I'll do that.
No, it's the optics are extremely bad. Even if you accept that everything that the public health agencies have ever told you about COVID is true, even if they have told you conflicting things here and here, the optics of somebody who is physically assaulted and dies after the camera has been turned away demands an explanation. What happened there? I understand that from people who work in the public health system that it's not an easy place to work, that tempers flare, some people are uncooperative. I'm not making a case at all in defense of these people, but I think we all have to recognize that this is a pretty stressful environment. But we expect the professionals who go into stressful situations, whether they're police officers, whether they're emergency technicians, whether they're security in a hospital, whoever it is who is supposed to manage stuff that happens, we expect them to be professional. And we don't expect to find that after they spend a few minutes with somebody, that person is dead. So if that happens, there needs to be an inquiry. And if the courts will not do it, and the court said there's not enough evidence to get a conviction, then somebody else needs to go after this because somebody died. That's not acceptable in this circumstance.
We got some new information today because the woman's name is Stephanie Warner. Her family today in Toronto filed a $16 million lawsuit against the hospital and the 2 security guards.
Good.
Now, this Stephanie had chronic lung ailments, and she went to the hospital because she couldn't breathe and she was coughing, and I think that she had COVID.
Oh no, there was from what I read, it was suspected she had COVID, but she didn't.
She didn't at the end.
But I guess we can still call it a COVID death.
Certainly. They allege that the 2 security guards came over. The security guard on the camera who turned it, the lawsuit says he turned it because he felt anxiety about what was going to happen. The 2 security.
If I was about to kill someone, I might feel anxious.
Yes, exactly. The lawsuit claims the 2 security guards took Stephanie, wrestled her to the floor, and put her hands in handcuffs behind her back. So they're obviously putting pressure on her back to keep her under control. And then they wheeled her out into an elevator and started CPR because she was basically already dead at that moment. That's what the lawsuit claims. And it's had a devastating effect on the family, the lawsuit says. In fact, her daughter Daisy went back into doing drugs and in fact passed away since this incident. So it's a tragedy that keeps on.
They've lost 2 daughters in one 10-day span? Or sorry,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure when Daisy
as a
died.
consequence of this?
Certainly,
So one daughter dies in hospital, the other one is upset and has since.
a grandchild. That would be a
Grandchild,
grandchild.
okay.
Right? So yeah, it was Stephanie's daughter. She was a former drug user. Had cleaned up. Yeah, it's a tragedy that just it won't go away. And Derek's right when he said it was gobsmacking to that this can happen. I will disagree with you a little bit. In any sort of homicide case, it's not that unusual to ask for a publication ban. But what we don't know is why they asked for a publication ban and who asked for it.
Yeah.
Right? So,
But most homicide cases don't have publication bans. It
they
happens
do.
sometimes.
They do.
Sometimes there are. When someone's killed and there's an arrest, we normally know about it.
Sure, but we don't have we always have publicity bans in the preliminary inquiry, right? Which is what the ban.
Yeah.
But we've had a publicity ban for 2 years.
Yes, oh, it's absolutely.
I mean, so I have a hard time seeing how this was not granted. Other than that, perhaps the court felt it was in the public interest that the public doesn't know about this because they would get angry. I mean, look how angry people were without, as far as we knew, there was no one killed over mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Well, some people might argue contrary on some of that, but no tangible 100% cases. And we have a woman who was killed for this because she wasn't wearing a mask. There could have been riots. But, this makes me recall, I forget his first name, but Floyd. Remember the black man in the States who was murdered by a police officer.
Breathe.
I can't breathe.
She couldn't breathe.
Yeah. Now, that guy was a criminal and not a very nice figure, but the police murdered him. They used clearly excessive force, and they killed him. That was captured on video. Now, this would have probably been captured on video if one of the guards who was involved in this didn't turn it away. But there was no publication ban. And people were rightfully angry. Now, some people expressed that anger wrongly. There was rioting and all sorts of crazy stuff, and people interpreted things, I think, poorly sometimes. But people were right to be angry about it, and they had a right to know about it. But Canadians had no right, apparently, according to the courts, to know about this. I'd speculate people would have been just as angry here. In fact, this wasn't even a criminal. That Floyd guy was a criminal and was being rightfully arrested. Just the way they arrested him was murder.
I think you were talking this morning about this would have sparked the Freedom Convoy
A year earlier.
a year earlier.
Yeah.
It would have got people across the country so upset that they would have been galvanized into action, I think.
And I can see how a court would say it's not in the public interest because for this to be known. It is in the public interest to keep this unknown because people would get so angry. I can see how a court might decide that.
Now the question is, will the Doug Ford government call a fatality inquiry?
That's a good question. I smell a call.
If you want answers, it's got to be an inquiry, right?
Yeah.
And get everybody under oath.
Well, I
And
guess if they go to court, that will bring out a lot of.
It'll bring out
that
some.
will bring out some.
But I
of it.
cannot imagine that Doug Ford wants much light on this because it was his mask mandate that was being enforced by these goons that ultimately resulted in her death. Doug Ford is happy to move past COVID. It was his mandate. And so in some measure, Doug Ford is also responsible for this.
Well, at arm's length, this is regardless of what I think we're all of a consensus of what we think of mask mandates, but regardless of what you think of them and of all the helpful information that turned out not to be so helpful, one of the saddest things about cases like this is that when you don't throw the light on it, it just increases the level of distrust for government and for security and for agencies. Justice needs to be seen to be done. And if a fatality inquiry is the way to go, then that's the answer. If taking it to court and having everybody cross-examined is the way to go, maybe it's both. But this thing needs to be
my
cleaned up.
fear would be the hospital knows they're in kind of a bad position. They'll write a check and they'll sign a non-disclosure or
That's the most likely outcome.
That's
That's what the way these things.
yeah.
things
And the
don't go
family
to
will
trial.
have to be quiet. So
Things rarely go to
again,
trial.
we'll never know what happened.
I will wrap up. Just one last question to you, Dave, on this one before we move on. It's just about the media's coverage of this. Now, good on CBC. CBC actually broke this story. Good on them. But this was not known for 2 years, as we've seen, you said. But it's known now. And this was a little blip in the CBC. We've done some stuff on it. For the last 2 days of the morning news meeting, I've sat there banging the table saying, I want us digging into this. This is the biggest story in Canada. In fact, it's an international story. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to investigate. So we're taking it seriously, but we're just ramping up because we're coming at we're starting from a standstill. But I've seen just virtually no media attention. It was like a one-day blip of a story and gone. Why do you think?
The desire for information is out there. This morning we published a story about the $16 million lawsuit, and it went crazy on our website. People want to know. People want to know what happened. But you're right, Derek. It was a one-day wonder with the mainstream media, and now it's disappeared. There's no follow-up stories. There's no nothing. I can't speak for the mainstream media, but I know who their bosses are, and they may just want it to go away. But we won't let it.
He who pays the piper calls the tune. All right, well, we're going to move on a little closer to home here. So 30 Alberta lawyers have been suspended from practicing law by the Alberta Law Society for refusing to participate in some politically correct re-education. Now, this is called The Path. No, it's not a sci-fi movie. It's a First Nations Indigenous training course that all members of the Law Society in Alberta are apparently required to go through. Tells them how racist they are, how racist everything is. It's got a bunch of stuff saying it's wildly political. You read through this stuff, and it talks about think about this while you're listening to the national anthem, and consider, I guess in the context of criminal stuff, we should consider restorative justice, which is code for slap on the wrist and nothing happens. If you're dealing with Indigenous peoples, it's extremely condescending to Indigenous people. We have a great column. Who wrote this column?
His name is Glenn Blackett.
Glenn Blackett,
a Calgary lawyer.
Yeah. So we'll come to that in a second. He wrote a great column on this,
yes.
Published in the Standard, and he made the point, I think, very forcefully that this re-education says that Indigenous people have no power. And when you believe you have no power, you have no power. It takes away their agency, that they could do nothing ever to help themselves. And this is all essentially white man's burden, that First Nations issues can only be solved by the white man's burden helping, that these people are incapable of helping themselves. It's incredibly racist in its own right, in kind of a white man's liberal burden kind of way. But yeah, we'll go with you. Maybe elaborate on the column and the reaction to the re-education program of our lawyers.
Well, see, there are 2 points in this column. The first is that here we go again with a regulatory body which is accountable not to the voters, but only to its own members, putting in place woke regulations. This is what the Ontario College of Psychologists is doing to Jordan Peterson. It is what the colleges of physicians and surgeons have done to doctors and nurses during the last couple of years when COVID has been out there, and they have permitted no dissent. Well, now here, it's not with the Alberta Law Society, it's not merely not permitting dissent, it's specifying what you shall believe. This is prescribed speech. It's very, very dangerous. The good thing, there's only one good thing, and that is that if the Alberta lawyers actually have the gumption to do it, they can vote in a new board.
Mm-hmm.
And they can change that, just the same as the psychologists in Ontario, if they feel sufficiently supportive of Jordan Peterson, can vote in a new board there. My only fear is that this actually represents some kind of consensus, and these people will willingly give away the freedoms that they have been.
Well, even if they do re-elect these boards, it's still tyranny of the majority. What gives, if Dave and I vote that we're going to hang you by your tie, well, majority rules. That doesn't make it right.
No. So the second thing in this column just deals with, well, what if we did apply the Indigenous reasoning, Indigenous thinking as they understand it, which may not be exactly what Indigenous people understand.
It was pretty funny because
themselves.
it read like, this is what a white guy thinks the
Yeah,
indigenous
exactly.
think.
exactly.
But I mean, as our columnist writes, he says, in the law as we understand it, we try to figure out what happened. If you apply the logic that the path recommends, this indigenous learning, well, then you try to find out what a bunch of people think happened, which is a rather different concept. It's all tied to postmodernism and subjectivism and how they managed to work, the works of Jacques Derrida into traditional indigenous thinking. I'm not sure, but they manage it, and so it's all loosey-goosey, and it doesn't really, words don't mean what.
It makes sense because you've seen all this bizarre language lately coming from this kind of woke postmodern crowd, where they say things like rugged individualism or objectivity are white supremacy. I mean, it blows my mind. So you're saying that people who are rugged individuals or believe that there is such a thing as an objective truth are white supremacists. That's something a white supremacist would say, because these are virtues. And these people are saying, well, but these things equal white supremacy. It's like they're trying to convince people to be white supremacists. It's insanity. So, Dave, what's been some of the reaction from legal community we've talked to?
Well, 30 of them that have, I guess, been stripped of their license, and I think the general reaction is everybody's just tired of the woke, tired of it, tired of getting up and being told that we're racist, and it would be like getting a letter from you telling me, okay, Dave, you're a bad person, you came in from Britain, you're a colonialist, you're a racist, you're a white supremacist. You can't tell. That's not what you want to hear from your bosses.
Here's your letter.
Yes, okay, I'll read it afterwards. But
I say all sorts of anti-English things.
We probably do at the Western Standard 1 or 2 stories every single day on something stupid being done by the woke crowd, and somebody's got to stand up at some point, surely.
Well,
Surely
Jordan
Nigel
Peterson is standing up.
Jordan Peterson is doing it. Yeah.
Well, I actually hope they never stop because it's just such a great source of news.
Oh, it is.
Like
and
they say dumb things and
I send it off.
get to report
I
it.
send the story out to our copy editor, Mike Demore, and he sends me it back with a note, just shaking his head. What is this country coming to, or what is wrong with people? Or, it's. Some of them are just laughable, absolutely laughable.
Hold on before you go on. Nico, we're going to have to put this up on the screen here. This was sent to me by a friend the other day, just to kind of demonstrate how insane this stuff is. I couldn't tell if it was real or a parody. It was so over the top, I thought, well, maybe a parody, but it's... so anyway, it's this Twitter account. Now, I should have read the name a little closer. It's at Ann Lesby, PhD. Now, read her name backwards. Her name's Ann Lesby. It says, head of gender studies at ACL University, anti-racist fetus, author, 1/8 Black, neurodivergent, typical non-binary, semi-trans lesbian who dates men, vegan plus, mentor. I thought, she duped me. This is a parody account. Apparently it's a bigger thing in the States. I hadn't seen it. But this thing duped me. And you just read through this thing and it's gold. Says, she refuses to let her children eat from gas stoves. That's something people would say now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
This is a good example. We had a story last week. I think it was Stanford University in the United States banned the use of the word field. Can you imagine that? So this is a school surrounded by sports fields, and now they have to go and change the name of every single field because they've banned the word field. And they said it was a racist word because it brought up memories of slaves working in a field. And they banned it. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not black and I haven't had the black experience, but I don't even think many black people would be offended by the word field.
Probably not. I think maybe the solution is to get all the woke people together and put them on a train that has not been designed by an engineer who believed in exact standards, who was in fact not objective but subjective. And so things kind of fit, but not quite, and then be sent over a bridge erected by people who thought close near enough is good enough. You know, maybe this is the answer.
People who believe the measurements and physics of it all were their truth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want them to stop. Like, I just kind of love to hate them. I feel a little lonely without them. They're company. Okay, well, look, always we can end on a kind of funny note with these nutters. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with me today, and thank all of you for being with us. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, join now. Go to westernstandard.news, click on membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. The Western Standard refuses to take the federal government's media bailout. We rely on the support of people like you, and that'll get you all access to all Western Standard content past that pesky paywall. Thank you very much for joining us today and your support. God bless. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. You become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99